Hello patrons, and welcome to part 1.5 of the combat controller setup. We're going to be going through setting up an aggro mechanic so the player will be able to initiate combat if they're between thresholds for too long, and that same mechanic can be used for fleeing combat, so passing the escape threshold won't immediately end combat, but start decreasing aggro over time until it's gone. When that happens, combat will be over and the player will have successfully escaped. So we're going to be keeping the begin overlap exactly the same, so when we get to the combat threshold, it will still be a hard start to combat. But we're going to be taking our component end overlap for the escape threshold, and we're also going to get a begin overlap as well. So we'll start with accumulating threat before we get to escaping, so we'll start off with the begin overlap. Again, like we did with the other overlaps, we only want to do this if our player is interacting with the collision. So we're going to set a timer by event. It's going to be looping. It doesn't need to be really fast. This is going to be how fast threat accumulates. I'm going to be setting it at 1/10 of a second, but you could set it to be whatever you would like. I kind of want this to tick down a bit fast just for tutorial purposes, but you might want to have that tick a bit slower, or when we get to setting the actual numbers for aggro, we'll come back and adjust that. So we're going to set up a custom event. We're going to call it the combat start timer. We're going to promote this return value to a variable. This is just going to be our aggro timer. Then we're going to create a new variable of type float, which is just going to be aggro or threat or FAFO, whatever you want to call it. And we're just going to accumulate a static amount, then we'll worry about setting it up to have a more dynamic amount based on proximity to how close we are to the combat threshold. We'll just say add 1. Then for branch, actually I'm going to say 5, just so we're not here forever. We're going to take our aggro and check to see if it is greater than 100. If it is, we're going to take our aggro timer and we're going to stop it, clearing and invalidating the timer by handle. We are just going to set the aggro to our max of 100, just in case it's over, and then we want to call start combat. I'm just going to get a print debug so we can see this on the screen to print out the total number of aggro we've accumulated. So we'll pass it, we'll accumulate 5 and 1/10 of a second. Then you'll see that they spawn this, and because we only have that do once in the start combat, it works exactly the same as if we were dancing in between these lines. So now we'll take our other threshold. We're going to just detach the reset combat and come back to that. And this is largely going to be the same thing, but in reverse. So we can copy our set timer by event, create a new custom event. This is going to be our combat end timer. Going to do the same thing with our aggro. Just flip the numbers around. Let's say -5. Then we'll check to see if this is less than or equal to 0. We're going to promote this to a variable. Our new timer handle is going to be flee timer. We're going to clear and invalidate. We're going to take the aggro, set it to be 0 just in case we tick under, and then we can reset combat. However, when we get to the point where we've been hanging around inside the thresholds for a little bit, and then we start backing out, we want to make sure that when we pass the escape threshold, we're no longer ticking up on aggro. So we're going to clear and invalidate our aggro timer. And then we're going to copy the flee timer and call that after we have our aggro timer running it again. So now you see it ticks up, and when we back out, it ticks down. When we start combat, easy enough. So how do we get this working with proximity? With a little bit of math. So we want to make sure that when we are within the threshold, our aggro is positive and ticks up, and if we are outside of the threshold, it's negative and ticks down. To do that based on distance, we need to get the escape threshold and get the distance between its location and the edge of the collision box, which is just simply getting the scaled sphere radius. Then we're going to subtract that number by the distance our player character is to the center of the sphere. So we'll get the player character, get the actor location, then we want to get our escape threshold and get its world location. Subtract the 2. Then get the vector length. We'll have to adjust this minorly, but that'll get the distance. And we want to make sure that these are small numbers, so we're going to divide by 100. Just going to put a reroute node there and collapse this all to a macro. We'll just call it calc aggro meter. And we'll connect that into the bottom of our addition. So if we go and test this out, see our aggro is ticking up the closer we get to our threshold. When we go away, the further we go, the faster it ticks down. Now there's some adjustments you need to make depending on your character, because if we inch up very close, you'll see this starts counting backwards because we are overlapping with our capsule component. However, that is not at the center of our character. That's on the boundaries. So since we're calculating to the center, which is roughly the pelvis of the actor, it is giving us a value that we don't want. So if we open up the calc aggrometer macro that we just made, we're going to adjust subtraction here. So we're going to actually take the vector length and we're going to further subtract that by our player character's scaled capsule radius. And even then, it might not be enough, so I usually just like to add a small number, like, say, 5. And then we'll connect that into our first subtraction, and then that into the next subtraction. So now when we inch forward, when we're in the same threshold, now we just count up. And we're going to continue counting up. So as soon as our capsule collision comes in contact, it's going to start, rather than just being the center location. So you can adjust that as you see fit. This aggro here, I'm going to promote this to a variable, and we're just going to call it max aggro. And the other one, promote that, and that's going to be the min aggro. And you can set these all as instance editable and exposed on spawn. So when you're placing down this actor into the map, you can change it depending on how big you want this to be. You can change it depending on the level or the scenario, however you see fit. But that's pretty much how we handle aggro. Thank you all for watching.